Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Freedom Network. I'm Gary Rosenberg, your host here for an hour of fun, politics, issues, that kind of stuff. That's what we do. You know the Freedom Network. If you don't, you're just joining us. Welcome to it. Are we good to go? We're good to go. So I guess now what we're going to do is we're going to come over to this one. See, this is the big time, folks. We're going to come over here, and we are going to push this button. And hopefully we're going to be welcoming Bunnie. Bunnie, you have to correct me if you're there, Bunnie. Are you there? Is
Yep.
it Bunnie Riedel?
Yeah, Riedel.
Riedel. You are the executive director of American Community Television, right?
Yes.
All righty. And we wanted to have you on today, and we wanted to discuss American Community Television. So we went right to the top here. Tell us a little bit what your organization is. What is it all about? How did it start, and what's going on?
Well, we educate and advocate on behalf of public, educational, and government access television. You know, the local channels like the one you're on,
Mm-hmm.
those that bring you the city and county council meetings, the school board meetings, really put a shine a light on local government. And then also public access is a free speech forum. Anybody in the community can be a public access producer and have a show with any topic really whatsoever. So basically it's public interest media at the base of everything. And, you know, we've got about 5,000 of these channels across the country in about approximately 2,000 different municipalities. And I think that we're pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, and people have often asked me, I've worked in radio. I've had some of these Freedom Network shows in radio and whatnot. And one thing that I do notice is that, and I have friends that maybe were a little more successful in some of those endeavors than I was, that there is too much content control and pressure and that kind of stuff. And I just like to say it like it is, and I want to say what I want. That's why I like being right here on community television. We've been in a couple of different studios. This place is fantastic. So we all know that we had our stations moved. Anybody watching locally, you know your stations moved. But this has affected not just this town, right? This whole process of moving stations and doing stuff like that has affected quite a few cities and towns, has it not?
You know, one of the problems we've got is, and I've dealt with the cable industry since, 1998. One of the problems we've got is that as the time has gone on, the cable industry has consolidated and consolidated and consolidated. And what used to be mom and pop cable companies have become these huge, huge national cable companies. And Charter, which has about 5 million customers right now, is set to grow to 20 million customers once they buy Time Warner and they buy Bright House, which is a lot of that's in Florida. So consequently, Charter's going to end up being number 2 in the country behind Comcast. And the problem being, as I've watched it over these 17 years, is the bigger they get, the less they care about the local community.
Oh, that's certainly
and
true.
of all the cable companies, and I can pretty much give you the corporate rundown for every one of those companies as far as their attitude, you know. Charter is the absolute worst of all the cable operators in this country. They're in Northbridge, Massachusetts. They're in direct conflict with the cable franchise agreement or the contract. In other words, they are sitting in breach of contract at this moment. That if Northbridge had the resources, and probably Northbridge does not.
No, Northbridge is pretty broke. I'm not going to lie.
It's small, too, and that's where they really run over local communities, is in these smaller ones. But if you guys went to court and just asked the judge for a summary judgment, which means, you know, tell us right now whether or not they're in breach of contract, they're in clear breach of contract in Northbridge. But what are you going to do about it? And that's what they know. And so they went into Western Massachusetts, not just Northbridge, but a lot of communities, and they slammed our channels from their positions, usually at the lower end, at 11, 12, 13. They slammed us up to 191, 192, 194, and so forth. Now, actually, you guys are better off than the folks in Wisconsin, because in Wisconsin, they've gone and slammed our channels into the 900s.
Wow.
Right, requiring an additional box, not just your regular cable box to get there, but an additional digital box to get there, which charges the local, you know, community $10 or so a month more. So if I want to get to my, you know, let's say I want to get to my mass for shut-ins, right?
Yep.
I'm an elderly woman living on a limited income, and maybe all I can afford is $32, $33 a month for cable. Well, now I've got to spend another $10 a month just to be able to go see my church service. So all across the country, Charter has done really just incredible things, in my opinion, to local communities, and they do it because they're able to get away with it.
Yeah, and see, that's the whole key, and that was kind of my next question for you is, what is it that what are you trying to accomplish? What is your end game? As I said to the to the last guest that we had.
Well, we have a federal piece of legislation called the Community Access Preservation Act. And in fact, we've got two parts of that bill that are specifically written to rein in Charter, believe it or not. And so consequently, we've been working on S-1244. It's in the Senate. It's been co-sponsored by your own Senator Markey and also by Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. And we're hoping we can move it. And part of the reason is now with Charter, doing what they're doing as far as the acquisition, to me, it's become the message I'm taking to the Senate, to Capitol Hill, and to the House side both. But listen, folks, we're in trouble, and we need your protection because all the cable operators, Charter has the most, really aggressive stance toward PEG access television and toward the local community. And so that bill, S-1244, if your watchers, your viewers can call their Senate office tomorrow. I mean, you've got Markey, so he's on it. But also, it would help even though he's on it, and he's been fabulous. It still helps for me if you call his office, because then he still gets to hear from the grassroots what people want. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think I sent this to Bill Tartaglia. We just filed at the FCC. They're doing a whole proceeding on whether or not Charter should buy Time Warner and Bright House. And what we filed was we want conditions placed upon that merger. And part of those conditions is that they got to stop slamming our PEG channels. Another part, is that we want the FCC to set up a committee or set up a panel that will allow small communities like Northbridge to come to the FCC with a grievance about the cable operator, and we're talking about across the country. They'll come to the FCC with a grievance and get the FCC to give us their opinion on that grievance. You don't have the resources, most small communities don't have the resources to start a full lawsuit, but at least we can get on the record at the FCC by these local small communities that their grievance is valid. That will help us a lot. I think that'll help a lot. It'll at least, I think at the end of the day, if we can only start shaming Charter, that might help a little bit.
It may, but they may have no shame. Bunnie, I got an email question coming in. Says why the separation? Can't all the communities band together in a class action suit against Charter?
I would love that. I really would. Because it happened in several communities. Not off the top of my head, I know for sure it happened in Worcester, and then there were several communities right around you.
Sure.
That happened, and I would love to see that. I mean, it's costly, it's very expensive, and actually Northbridge probably has one of the better contracts because you stated clearly in that contract exactly where these stations are supposed to be.
Which, that is what blows my mind, especially here in this town, that why does it have to cost us a fortune to fight that? I mean, why is the process, what is the process that maybe they're even going through now? And where in that process would we be? And then what is the goal? To go back to 11 or to what's the end game on that?
Well, you would. Here was the deal, too. You got a beautiful piece of testimony on record, video record, of the Charter fellow, I think his name was Cohen, explaining to the selectmen there, or the town council in the town, that, he shouldn't have done it, but he did it, and that's the end of the story. And the other thing he said to them was, nobody watches those lower channels, right? That's what he said. And sure enough, what did Charter put in place on 11, 12, and 13? They put in Telemundo, a home shopping channel, an NFL network. Well, if nobody watches them, then why did you put in a couple of your golden gooses into that spot?
Absolutely. Bunnie, that proves the point that it is a good spot. Plus,
absolutely.
When you're scrolling through,
right,
and you're going through cable, that you hit a spot where there's, foreign language stuff. You hit a spot where it's all pay-per-view stuff, and you blast through these. And it seems like what they're doing, to be honest with you, from my perspective, somebody that likes to utilize public access, is that they're trying to marginalize it to a point so that they make sure it doesn't really matter, that it doesn't gain that, like this
Yep.
emailer had said, people banding together. Maybe someday maybe there's sharing between the stations. Maybe a show like this gets a little too big, and ruffles a little too many feathers, stuff like
Right.
that, which they can't stop anyway with the internet. But it's just, this whole thing has been amazing to me. We even included it in our show's open. So every time we do the open to the program,
Right.
we talk about it. I don't understand why they had
Right.
to move it. What was the under or overarching reason that
They just
they used?
decided to do it, and here's the whole point. They said, well, we're going digital, blah, blah, blah. Well, let me explain something. Time Warner in Kansas City and also Charlotte, North Carolina, various places, went all digital, okay? However, though, the access channel, the government access channel in Kansas City, Missouri, is on Channel 2. Now, never mind that their real physical space is like 96.5, but when the viewer sits down, they see their council meetings on Channel 2.
Yeah.
Same thing with Charlotte, North Carolina. Their real position is 98 point something. But when the viewer sits down, they still see the public access channel on 21. That's exactly what Charter could have done, and that's what we argued on our FCC filing. They could have mapped those channels so that the viewer had a seamless experience. But they don't do that. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And, in the, like I said, 17 years I've been fighting the cable industry. This is what they do. They marginalize PEG. They marginalize our community channels. I mean, I've talked to tons of folks from foreign governments who used to come, the State Department would bring them. And, we're the only country on this planet that has these things called these public ed and government access television stations. And it's, to me, it's a miracle. I call it the happy accident. But the thing about it, that's valuable space. That's democratic space. That's public interest space. And it's ours. It belongs to the local community. It doesn't belong to the multi-big corporations. It doesn't belong to some, giant in New York or L.A. or D.C. It belongs to the local community. That channel that you're on right now is Northbridge's channel. But this is what they have typically done over the years, over and over. I have fought them, and Charter's the worst because I can't do anything to shame them. I do everything I can to shame them. I want to tell you something for your folks viewing there.
Sure.
This is what Charter's about. In Missouri, they had a state law passed called statewide franchising, so all those contracts went up to the state. And because the law was silent on whether or not there should be cable drops provided by the cable operator to police and fire departments, Charter went into police and fire departments all across Missouri and pulled their cable drops.
Are you serious?
I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Oh,
Stand-up company, huh? Stand-up company.
You would think after I got the fraternal order police on them that they would have, mea culpa and said, oh, well, of course, no. No, they went in. There was one point in a town called O'Fallon, Missouri, where they walked into City Hall and the city manager had the police chief escort them out. But that's the kind of stuff. They just walked into Missoula, Montana, about 8 months ago and said, well, now you need these boxes for every TV in your school district. Well, they figured out the cost was going to be $60,000 to $80,000 per year, okay, per year on the school district, just to be able to have that cable in the classroom.
Now,
Whereas
schools.
they could have sold or provided them these other things called DTAs, these little boxes, that would have cost about $3 a piece.
Bunnie, that's it. Well, first of all, it's insane because the schools don't have any money. The schools are all looking for money. But let me ask you a question. Why doesn't, if the, the toy industry makes a toy and it breaches a law or it's no good or whatever the case is, the government goes after that. Why isn't the government just stepping in to fix this? I mean, where's the FCC? Why do we have to go and fix this? Why is it so backwards?
That's what we're asking from the FCC. The FCC collects about $80 million per year to regulate cable. And I can sign out an affidavit to you right now that the FCC has not done anything to regulate cable for at least the last 5 to 7 years. But they're
Bunnie,
still collecting
how much
from
is
all
that?
the subscribers, $80 million a year.
So
what we're saying is that money you're already getting in, take that to set up a panel. So here are the grievances of these small communities. You're not Boston, and you're not Chicago, and you're not L.A., and you can't just walk into a courtroom because those telecommunications lawyers who know this stuff, they're pretty expensive. You can't just walk into a courtroom and say, boom, and it slaps you with a lawsuit. You can't do it. We want another mechanism that says, we're listening to you, we've decided this, and I think that if we can get to the point where we've got enough decisions against Charter that they will have to back down. So it's not just you by yourself, but it's the FCC also saying to Charter, knock it off.
I mean, I'm still back at $80 million, Bunnie. What are they, and how many, I mean, they collect this yearly? And if they collect,
bill.
how?
It's 8 to 9 cents per month. It says FCC regulatory, cable regulatory fee.
And what are they supposed to do with this money?
They're supposed to regulate cable.
And how, what, like, can you give, well, you just said, I guess there's none, but what, can you give me any example of what regulating cable would, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, they were supposed to, at one point in time, try to keep the prices down. They were supposed to, like, especially, I don't know if you noticed this, but, you know, your cable bill goes up, right, every year, right? So one year I get my cable bill, and I'm looking, and, oh, the video has not gone up, and the internet has not gone up. But then by the time I got through looking at all the equipment fees, that's where they got their 6% rate increase, was in the equipment.
Yes, this has become the new thing. It's like
Right,
with the
and
cell
that's where-
phones,
and
yeah.
that's the stuff that the FCC was supposed to regulate, and they don't regulate, and they really, you know, and part of the problem, Gary, is you got me, and you got a couple other people. We're going to the Hill, we go to the FCC. The cable industry has 600 lobbyists on Capitol Hill alone, just on Capitol Hill. They're at the FCC 24/7. All right, so you can see how that works.
You know, 600 lobbyists. I mean, think about that, folks. So we talk about government and the problems in government and the way it doesn't work for the people. Here's a prime example. I mean, and they're collecting, you know, it's funny because they're collecting money.
Right.
The government, right, is collecting money.
Yep.
So I would, see, this is why no one wants an audit of anything.
Yeah.
Right? Because where is $80 million a year for how many years that they've been collecting it? Where is that money?
Right.
And why would they not? I mean, here it was ridiculous. I mean, you've got a situation where they find out they're moving. They have very little time to do so. The resources, as you well know, at these stations are not endless. You make up business cards. You make up, you know, websites, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And nothing. Nothing.
Well, as I understand it, and tell me if I'm wrong, Bill said he got in there that morning and either somebody called or he couldn't find his channel. They didn't even have the courtesy to call the access operator or the town to say, guess what, we moved your channel. That's not the first time that's happened. We had that situation out in Colorado a few years ago. You know, where the guy gets in, he gets a call from a woman who says, where's that channel at? And he had to go searching for it. Because they didn't have the courtesy to call them up and say, we're moving your channel now. You know?
Unbelievable.
Well, and Gary, you know, what this is, too, is that PEG access in the world of television, as important as I believe that it is, and I do believe it is. I mean, I live in a community between Baltimore and D.C. that does not have a daily paper or barely has a weekly paper. We don't have a radio station. And the only time we get covered by either the Baltimore news or the D.C. news is when there's a shooting at the mall. That's it, you know? So the only information we get about what's going on in our county is what's happening on the government access channel. Because basically our county government could just run roughshod all over us if we didn't have that programming out and people weren't watching that programming. And the same thing with, you know, the church services and so forth, is that it's really awesome. To me, PEG television, and I've never operated television. I'm a regulatory policy wonk. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's the most incredible piece of real estate that we have. But we're treated like the redheaded stepsister. Do you know what I mean? Like, just set her behind the door and ignore her. She'll stop whining and go away.
Bunnie, how did this all happen? How did you get here?
Years ago, I applied for a job with another organization that also does PEG stuff, and they put in the ad First Amendment issues. Well, that was my background, was working on First Amendment issue stuff, you know, free speech, freedom of religion, et cetera. And so I said, well, gee, that's me, and I'll answer that, and that's how I got started. And when I first started, I didn't really understand it. One of the things that was interesting was I realized as I went along that I had been on public access television in stations, but I didn't know the difference between them and the regular TV station. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I'd been interviewed by public access people, but I didn't realize that was going on.
Yeah.
And as I went along, and of course it was a huge technical lift for me because I had to learn all the technical stuff.
Sure.
As I went along, I began realizing just how incredibly precious this real estate is for the communities and for democracy. I had a fellow from Thailand in my office one time that he was a business editor for 2 business papers, and he looked like he just got dressed out of Goodwill. I mean, he looked very skinny and pathetic. And there was a translator there, too. And I was telling him about PEG, right, explaining it to him. At the end of it, he looks at me and he says, if we had these channels, the government would take them away from us.
Of course.
And I almost cried. I almost cried because I sat there and I had never really had someone say that directly to me in that way. And I realized, my God, this is huge. What we got here is so big. And it's so important. And even if you don't watch the channels much, I mean, there are some people that have their favorite show that they'll go to, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But even if you don't watch it that much, having it available to you. And I spoke with John Boehner, is getting ready to leave, and he had a wonderful staff person. And she said, oh, no, I watch the Educational Access Channel because by the time I go home after 12 to 14-hour days, I can't go to a school board meeting.
Right.
If I'm cooking dinner, I'm watching it on TV.
Absolutely.
The school board meeting.
Absolutely. Bunnie, we've had a lot of that discussion even here in town and getting that stuff up there and getting it up there more timely.
Yep.
We've talked about it. It's funny. I always say that freedom of speech guarantees you the right to do just that, right? It does not guarantee you, though, a platform. And you bring up a good point because it kind of does guarantee a platform when you do it in this environment that we're doing it in now, because you're right. If you're a citizen of the town, you can go in and you can produce a show.
Right.
And you can put it on television, and you do have the right to do that. No one can tell you can't, nor can they control the content.
Right.
If we give that up, we look at it now. You don't know what the future is going to bring. This may be the last bastion of freedom. Look at how the media is going now, anyway, buddy. You can't get real news anyway.
Everybody points to the internet, but trust me, every day I read another article, and it won't be. And we keep talking about open internet. That's not what's going to happen.
No, they're regulating the what out of the internet. Forget it.
Control is data usage.
Yeah, the internet is basically exists, in my opinion, so the government can learn about you. I mean, it's just an experiment in control.
We put a big victory. Okay, we're going to have open internet, blah blah blah. But it won't be content control. How they'll do it, and this is the corporations doing this. How they'll do it is they'll do it through data usage. Do you know what I mean? Every
Sure.
time you stream something, like for me, I love to listen to online radio, like Sirius Online.
Sure.
And all of that uses data. So that's how they'll control what gets to you or doesn't get to you, because you're going to get blocked, and if you want more, you're going to have to pay more for it.
Absolutely. It's a nasty little game that's being played. Give your contact information out, Bunnie, so people can get a hold of you and learn more about this, get involved if they want.
That'd be great, Gary. It is A Community TV, just like that, acommunitytv.org, American Community Television. We've got everything online about the legislation we're working on. We've got some videos about it. But we really need people to pick up the phone and call. And even though, Senator Markey's on the bill, and God bless him, I love him so, at the same time, he still needs to hear from you. Because we always need to have them shored up, Do you know what I mean? Because the cable operators, trust me, the cable operators like Charter and Comcast are in his office all the time.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm absolutely positively sure. And it's
so any kind of boost, any kind of backup I can get, I really appreciate.
All right, so it's Bunnie Riedel, acommunitytv.org if you want to learn more about it. If you need information or a link because you didn't just get it, just send it to my email and we'll make sure we send it right on over to you. Bunnie, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for the time.
Keep us updated, all right? Please come back.
I will.
All right,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And off she goes. Bunnie, she's got a lot of energy and she's got a lot of information, and I'm going to tell you something, folks. Charter, I'll be honest with you, the reception, that kind of stuff is better than it used to be when we first got to town several years back. But what they did was it's just craziness. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that should come first. It should be easy to find, easy access because it's free, and it should be free for you to be able to get. You shouldn't have to get boxes and stuff because you pay for it in your cable bill. All right, so you're paying for this to be here. We all collectively pay for this. Access should be easy, and it should be very easy because, once again, you're paying for it. Folks, it's been a crazy show. No real time to get into the other subjects I wanted to, but I did want to thank you for tuning in. Get your show ideas, get your petition questions, get it all together, send it all in. This is the Freedom Network. We'll be back next week. Martha's Vineyard is for me this weekend, but I'll let you know how it was when I come back next week.